We all know that AI is really set to transform future of work, be it the usual automating of routine tasks, right, to augmenting how we, our capabilities of how we are doing things, and eventually actually to what we call co-creating new opportunities together. I think that really will, as a result, change the way we look at roles, right? So roles that are repetitive, data intensive, I would say they might be at the short term be most affected, right? And new jobs will emerge right after that phase, and we are now looking at more areas such as oversight onto AI, right? So how AI is performing, whether is it causing any form of ethical or responsible issues to humans, and also how human and AI can collaborate over the long term. That really drives the reason why we wrote a book on AI for humanity, which is talking about building a sustainable AI for the future. We have a term called human AI symbiotic intelligence, and this model will really give a glimpse on how future of work may shape out. Human AI symbiotic intelligence, so we call it HASI, H-A-S-I. I think right now I'm more of an educator, so I teach in SUSS, on a part-time basis. So I do courses on AI as well as AI ethics, and I also do courses on automation, for professionals who are thinking about embarking onto AI, but hey, this is not something that will appear suddenly just by magic. You still need to automate certain manual processes, right, before we reach the stage of having the right ingredients. So, to build an AI model, you need data followed by the right model to address that specific problems. Yeah, so it's AI in general. Gen AI is actually one of the pillars. Before Gen AI came in, people associated AI with machine learning. Whereas, in my class, we talk a lot about machine learning is being a subset of AI. The very early stages of AI, even back in the 1960s and 70s, they were very chatbot based. They were very symbolic logic based. And in fact, what we saw in Gen AI, in ChatGPT, for instance, actually exists about 50-60 years ago, but it was in the form of a black screen and green words. So there were prototypes back then that sort of mimic what we are experiencing today. But over the years, you can see there are two winters that AI has faced, followed by right now the next boom is already in shape. What we are really fearing is when people are not using AI responsibly or in the right manner, it brings about the third winter. And when it comes to trust, right, when you lose trust, right, it's very hard to gain back, right? So if you lose trust in AI can create more opportunities, more jobs for you in the future of work, then that narrative will never come back. Or even if it come back, there is still that sense of doubt. So I think that it's very crucial that people now achieve a certain level of AI, we call it AI literacy, right? And that's what the universities are trying to do at this point in time, right? To drive the idea of what AI exactly means. Right, once you understand the fundamentals of AI with its capabilities and limitation, then we move into the moral theories around what is right or wrong. We actually carry out the right or wrong together with our long-term partner, which is AI, to be able to continue to collaborate and be responsible together. Right now, we are seeing a huge increase in the number of people wanting to know what exactly is AI. Of course, for the very reason, is it going to take away my job? Or is it going to create a new opportunity for me? So I think that kind of awareness is there. Fantastic, right? So awareness are always needed for us to have the opportunity to teach them. So you can see right now we are also revamping some of our educational curricula so that we can provide training programs to equip them with skills that are AI driven. It can be technical or hard skills, it can be soft skills. It's not always about data science, calculus, right? Your sine, cosine, tangent, and machine learning algorithms, mathematics. That we have a lot of experts. But what we are truly lacking right now are people who works in a specific industry. They knew that in that industry what is right or wrong, how right or wrong is being delivered, being utilized. And that part of a human AI collaboration is much needed right now. And that's what we really hope when people come on board. The kind of literacy that we are really driving them towards is, if you think that one day you're going to be an engineer, scientist, yes, we have a technical path for you. But if you're going to be remaining in what you're doing, for example, my last class, I have a pilot who came in. He fly a A380, Sing London. So every 2 weeks, he makes sure that he comes to my class. And I think the amazing part is after the class, he could see the possibility of how AI doesn't replace his job and actually how he can serve his customers a lot better. So I think, like this kind of education, right, will be very essential, right, to bring the literacy level from level 1 to level 2, and followed by when you hit the stage of you know what you're doing, you know what is right or wrong, then you try to understand your companions a little bit better. You go into level 3, right, you learn a bit of Python, you learn a bit of coding, and when you reach the level of able to symbiotically merge together, where the AI needs you, you need the AI. There's no such thing as replacement, but progressively both are moving together as one entity. I think that kind of singularity is a lot better than the current narrative of singularity means AI controls everything and destroy the world. Will that happen? Yes, there's a possibility, but it really boils down to how we are managing the risk at this point in time. I want to start off not talking about AI first. Why? Because this part about emerging technologies impacting jobs is not new to all of us. Let's go back a little bit into the Industrial Revolution era when the first steam engine was developed. It brings about a very big change in how things are manufactured, transportations are being done. No doubt it may kill some of the businesses, such as maybe the rider that is pulling the cart, riding a horse, carrying someone. But essentially, these people upskills themselves and they move into a higher level or higher order kind of work. They became a technician. There's mass production. Manual labor was even more demanded like that, right? So you can see the steam engine was like the very first history that we saw emerging technology disrupted jobs, but it came out so much better. We had so many innovation, new engineerings and machine operations these days, right, that didn't appear overnight. We also talk about like printing, right? People are trying to basically create a way of communicating. So there were telephones, there were newspapers, right? Those were around. People were running kilometers just to send message. We all watched TV and movies. Pigeons and birds were the ones who sent messages, but we were praying that they actually sent to the right people, not to our enemies, right? So again, disruption came in and changed that. Then we saw the rise of the ASP.NET trying to create an architectural framework with IBM leading the mainframe. Didn't really turn out well. And when Salesforce, Concur, and some other early software as a service company, or what we today call a cloud company, came in to sort of using computational resources, using personal computer, using internet, liberating how information is being shared and consumed. I think that was the time when people were wondering, are we going to go out of jobs also, right? I was in that era, right, where I was telling people about cloud computing. People were very resistant because they are so used to selling units of server, floppy disks, CDs, right, and DVDs whatsoever. But look at today, right? We turn a sort of a capital expenditure business model into an operating model where people purchase on a month-to-month basis subscription. Your Netflix is one example. Do you have to go into a shop to rent a CD today? You don't have to. Well, you still get that in New Zealand. There are some very backward shops. Yeah, I can send some pictures in the future. But again, you see different communities and cultures progress differently. And that brings me to the point where in today's era, AI, as I mentioned, it brings about more automation. It brings about more intelligent automating routine works, right? So looking at tasks that are more routine, such as like customer service, right, or even content creation these days, perhaps some administrative roles, right, or even the manufacturing functions could be the near-term sort of jobs or task or industry be affected. And I use the word short-term. Why? Because especially right now, a lot of the AI research driving new ways of doing things. We are looking at, because of AI, because of the overcrowded cities. Singapore is overcrowded. Now look at places like Beijing, look at Thailand, look at Indonesia, right? These cities are overcrowded, right? So how can we then take along some of this technology, right, into some of the tier 2, tier 3 rural cities and build up similar ecosystem so that we create more jobs, right? And we spread out our talents, and overall the entire ecosystem GDP will improve, right, naturally, right? Because you remove some form of competition, you create new competition in new ground, and that really drives a lot more good wills than what people are talking in the market. Of course, I'm not saying that there's no bad things that is turning out, right? So So I really felt that people needs to adapt and thrive, right? We need to look at some of the government initiatives, right? And even, like courses from Straits Interactives where there are AI complement skill sets that does not replace human work, but it actually creates a new opportunity, new work for you, right? So this transition really requires education, policy support, and a bit of entrepreneurship, right? A bit of that mindset where you think, hey, with technology today, I'm empowered to do what I couldn't do in the past. I think the way people are participating into generative AI, that's one I think great thing that we are experiencing. Now the thing is, how do we use this technology? For what purpose? Are we using it to, address some of the biggest problem in the world, or are we just simply solving a very selfish individual goal? So what I'm trying to say is, in the near future, I can see people to, be more open-minded, be willing to look at bigger problem, right? Be more willing to say, hey, this problem is no longer as daunting as it was, just a couple of years ago. For instance, right, today we can actually look at quality educations, right, where AI is being harnessed into a lot of educational technology companies, right? Even in the space of, we are talking about, human can't govern AI because the speed of how AI is changing and evolving, being very self-learning, self-adapting, right? Sometimes it surprises us because we kind of learn something from what AI interacted with us. Sometimes it may not be text. It may be a certain form of movement, a business process that you never thought about. But employing artificial intelligence, it shows you a different way, right? So that thing will come, and in fact, it's already coming, right? That we have seen. And we are talking about solving big problems in the world. Right? The United Nations has came together to define development goals. And to be honest, how much % of the goals has been addressed or actively addressed, right? Issues such as life underwater, right? A lot of climate changes are fundamentally not just anything above water. Actually, the climate below water does affect, the environment above. So have we understood the underwater situation enough, right? So there are scientists that build, that use drones, use computer vision technology, skill sets, and deploy underwater, right? To do, to basically collect more data that we couldn't have done as a human, right? Or even you have tons of money, right? You get the top 3, top 5 richest people together. How many submarines can they build, right? Each piece of submarine is 6-figure, right? How many can they build to explore the underwater? But with technologies like AI, we could. Very hard. Humans have consensus upon problems. If startup can actually think, or even companies, existing traditional company can think that way, and when they use and deploy AI, they have that in their, as their end goal, where they being part of the value chain and supply chain, they benefits. So I'm not saying that you sacrifice your commercial, become a charity. You are definitely a beneficiary. Focus more on the outcome than the process itself, right? So when you have the outcome defined at a much higher level, which is humanity, right? You will know where you play in that chain, and you'll know the purpose of using AI to harness that value. It's a lot more meaningful, powerful, and you'll be surprised, getting you richer. I think one of the interesting things here is if you're dealing with Gen AI with images, videos, right? There is always this concern about privacy, and which what Straits Interactive is very strong in, right? Data protection. The thing here is there are many ways to do things, right? So if you talk about AI privacy, I have one very interesting use case. Down here under New Zealand, I had a chance to meet with Professor Michael from Auckland University under the School of Computer Science, and one of the research that they are embarking on is really cool. They study the behaviors of meerkats. Right, so I guess they have done enough research to say, the way they interact, right, the kind of social behavior they are exhibiting is very similar to human, right? And what they are trying to do is when they are observing, collecting data from meerkats, they are trying to avoid that privacy challenge. So they are actually trying to build models, right, that can eventually be used in the human society. So you don't use the human to build the model, right? You use somewhat similar mammals to build models that can later on be beneficial to both ecosystem. right? So that's something that universities is researching on. So he had 𝘠𝘓𝘃𝘓 statues and pictures of what is angry, sad, bully, this, and all this, right, in their database, right? So you thought that, why not pigs, right, or why not monkeys, right? So I guess all these research are fantastic, right? They have done so much to balance, which, in my book we talk about how we balance, this thing about governance, commercial, as well as the technology, right? So he displayed that kind of balance, right, to ensure that AI is being used for good, right, rather than while the intention was for good, but people felt that you are discriminating me, you're using my face, etc., right? You're tracking my privacy, etc., right? And of course, in the early 2018, we also saw a lot of innovative companies like Amazon coming out with their own AI tool, trying to use internally to do recruitment. So the issues of bias is still there. Unfortunately, just a risk. It will never be a zero risk. It's about how we bring biasness to a level where everybody can accept, right? At least at the point in time, right? So again, what Amazon has done, and they have resolved it, right? I think back then they were using recruiting tools that discriminated women, right? Male candidates seems to have a better chance, right? And then they did a research together, right? And they actually use adversarial learning. They also use some of the privacy enhancing technology techniques, whereas they can actually mask data even before, they call it to blind the data, right? Before it gets input back into the model, right? So in a way, the model is not being biased, right? They are not biased against the previous data, yet it is considering some of the attributes in their training, right? So that itself helps in creating a human in the loop process as well, right? Where the human will also assess the fairness and accuracy, right? And again, when we talk about a lot of what we talk about is algorithmic bias, right? We see a lot of that happening in education sector as well, right? So in UK during COVID-19, I think the UK government used an algorithm to determine A-level study grades. The algorithms was over-reliant on some of the historical data, right, to almost like 40% of their students who actually received a lower grade than they were expected to get, right? So again, the lesson learned is you need human in the loop. The human-AI symbiotic relationship doesn't go away. And that issue from the UK government could be easily solved if there was human oversight, right? If it's not everything purely done through AI decision, right? We can actually combine human judgment, which is a very difficult sort of action to be right now done by AI yet, right? Because when you talk about cognitive, you talk about taxic knowledge, right? So these are very, very experiential, right? So it will take time, right, for AI to come to that level, right? And meanwhile, I think human in the loop is still the best way, right, to keep AI in checks, right? And in the future, we talk about a term called governable AI, right? When I say human can't govern AI, because we need to start creating AI that governs against AI, right? So because of that speed, right, because of that nature of learning, it is not like a calculator or a mobile phone, right? It is able to think. It is able to make new knowledge that you and I may not know. Right, so then we need to start creating what we call governable AI, and these days people are using it in a very creative manner as well, right? They are using it in a way of what we call AI agents, right? They will probably train a model that thinks very similar like Jill, very similar to like Sean, but Jill and Sean is not here, and then I can hold a discussion with Jill and Sean, right, based on your usual style of expression, and that itself is productivity, because I have two sets of, we are doing a podcast here, and then another pair of us is doing some very constructive work somewhere else. That's only been arbitrary, right? Just two. You can spin up virtual machine, you can have really so much possibilities. So next generation might be spoiled for choices. When different engineers are looking at like chatbots, natural language processing, focusing mostly on text, computer vision, on images, translation, or even voices, right? I also know of a researcher in NUS that does research on smell. So you can see all these cognitive and sensories, right? Each of them has actually a subset of AI. They may not be using machine learning, right? They may be agent to collect data to facilitate a process, right? So So the idea of AI equals to ML can be better understood, right? The idea of AI is equals to Gen AI, prompt engineering can also be better understood as we progress with the technology growth. Yep. So again, I'm very fortunate to be part of the technical committee of the ISO work group, right? So right now, the JTC1 SE42 work group has a total of 40 participating members. Participating members are countries, essentially. Singapore is one of the members. And under this membership, we have 30 technical committee members. So I'm part of the AI governance pillar, where we focuses on the 42001 standards that has recently been published. Right, I think one of the most important part about this standard, right, was the initial parts of the standard that talks about why the understanding of your role, the part about your role means the organization role in AI is so crucial. So it's like, am I an AI vendor? Am I an AI user? Am I an AI developer? Right? Or am I an AI business processor? Right? That sort of thing. So the idea is when you adopt different roles, right, essentially the kind of considerations in the creating, right, the testing, deploying, and the implementing of the AI will change, right? So how to be a lot more wholesome, right, in considering your role in AI is actually very, very, very important. And that has been missing so far, right? Again, it took time for the international standards to come together, right, to agree on a certain way of doing, not the best way, right? But as in, to some organization or some entity, some nation, it may not be the best, but at least from a world perspective, we have a larger consensus, right, to it. So right now we are seeing that there's a lot of over-reliance, right, on looking at AI as a commercial tool, right, and that AI can solve a problem without human intervention. Okay, let's commercialize it, let's capitalize on it. Not wrong, but very lopsided, right? We are not considering other pillars that just now we have been talking about, right? Talking like governance, as well as the impact to humanity, right? And the technology that you'll be using. And again, about literacy. Organizations and corporates are also... No, the good thing is now we are getting a lot more awareness, thankfully. But, if I would say during COVID season, right, when I was part of a charity organization in UK, when we were talking about AI audits, there was so little understanding on biasness and fairness, right? So, like, people fail to address that very hard problem, right? And especially when developers are being engaged, they are just being asked about how to get the most accurate model. But by being most accurate doesn't mean they are being the most fair, right? So it also doesn't mean that being most accurate, you are not biased, right? So these were issues that were the common pitfalls. And I think we all know that in the early stages, AI models were also not transparent enough, right? So over the years, you can see that, researchers, developers has been enhancing this part, right? So these days, models are a lot more explainable, right? So you can actually, have the AI to write the explanation, right? So to say, why are you doing this? So you have to code it that way so that AI can execute it. But before that, when no one understood the idea of responsible AI, that itself wasn't considered, right? And of course, I've been highlighting balancing approach, right? So I'm very, very happy that right now, the society is moving towards that balancing part. And we're just going to get better. So it just takes time. And of course, podcasts like this or session interviews like this, will get people to debate against, right? To say, no, that's not right. Or to say, yes, I absolutely agree what you're doing. No, I can do this better, right? So we really hope that, more and more people can step up, right? Come and share about what you think, right? About, AI that is in the current situation, right? And how it actually affect you and the society and the humanity. I think that is really an important message that I hope to drive out to the audience. So a very interesting situation happens to the standard committees, right? So again, typically standards get reviewed every 5 to 10 years. But when it comes to AI, actually, lots and lots of changes were happening, right? We couldn't wait for 5 to 10 years. So I would say yes, the way regulations will play out, policymaker has to come out with policies that are aligning to AI, it has to be a lot more dynamic. And if you remember, sometimes humans are very hard to catch up on what AI is evolving into, right? And that's the reason why you are seeing a lot of governable AI technology, right, coming out. One of the companies like PureML, they are US based, San Francisco. What it does is, they create controls, right, within machine learning models, right, that can be used by risk managers within their enterprise risk management framework, right, to manage that piece of risk. That's like how they have managed risk from the aspects of people, business process. This is a new area of systems, and they can actually set new key risk indicators, right, to measure certain threshold, whether certain things are malicious, harmful, right. You are seeing all this coming up, and these are all what we call principles for responsible AI development, right? Because you care about it, and therefore you want to collect it, you want to control, form guardrails to manage it, right, and be able to ensure that you follow a certain ethical guidelines. And ethical guidelines at the national level can always be very broad-based, right? In fact, right now, Singapore is leading the pack, right? So we are also forming Singapore standards for 42001. So you guys will be hearing from us very soon, together with Straits Interactive, right, in the Q1 2025. So together with IMDA and ESG, right, we are trying to really drive that part about 42001, focusing on responsible AI, and it does cover personal protection, right? Personal data protection. So I would say PDPC is still very important. In fact, it's one of the authoritative documents, right, that needs to work in tandem with a very AI-specific document, right? And together, organization will adopt it, right, and actually create relevant control objectives, right, that they can actually, both the organization, individual, as well as AI, accountable, right? And these mechanisms will then ensure that we have a lot more open transparency, right? So we want to promote transparency, and over time you will see the mandating of disclosure about AI capabilities and limitations, right? And this is not about spilling out a secret sauce, right? This is about telling people that we are doing this because we know that we are AI vendor and as well as an AI user, right? So you see, so they kind of practice, right? And like individuals like myself and some of my peers, right? We do a lot of the 42001 implementations, right, as well as over time when the implementation kicks in, we will audit them as well, right? So you will still see human in the loop, right, to ensure that ethical guidelines are followed. And if you are in Europe, of course, it's EU AI Act, and you notice that there are similarities, right? You are not too far away when you are adopting an international standard. And if you are in US, we have recently there is a new NIST framework, on AI as well. Right, so you can see that US focuses a lot more on the cybersecurity side, right? So every country has a different focal point, right? So US may be more cybersecurity, right? Europe will be more privacy, and when you talk about EU AI Act, it doesn't make sense to Chinese in China, right? So they have a different perspective of maybe looking at areas of trustworthy, right? How to basically elevate the level of trust, right? And of course for Singapore, right, we actually embrace all of this, right, and we have a very strong focus on privacy as well as keeping the idea that we need to verify, right? We need to the part about AI Verify Foundation is actually working towards promoting transparency, and with that, regulators can come in, build sandbox, involve more global corporate, so that the AI challenges can be resolved at a much higher level, right, to mankind and humanity rather than just at company level or nation level.